Hi, my name is Ela Ranade, and I'm going to be discussing resilience among minority groups. So I would like to start off with a question. What is resilience? On the surface, resilience is one's capacity to withstand a difficult situation or to recover and grow from a challenge. However, UPenn psychology professor Adam Grant and author Sheryl Sandberg take it a step further. They define resilience as a muscle, something that can be built up over time with difficult experiences. And perhaps nowhere is this muscle of resilience more developed than within minority communities. They experience issues ranging from economic disparities to lack of access to education to discrimination on the daily. This led me to ask the question, how can minority groups stay resilient in the face of hardships? Firstly, minorities show resilience against climate issues, in this case, excessive flooding. This is an image of a double living root bridge created by the Khasi, an indigenous group in northern India. According to indigenous technology expert Julia Watson, these bridges are created by growing and guiding tree roots into scaffolding. In a forest that is constantly flooded, their ability to build these bridges allows Khasi communities to communicate with one another. This tradition has existed for 1,500 years, and the bridges they build last for centuries. Not only are these bridges symbolic of resilience against flooding, they are also symbolic of the resilience of the Khasi people in maintaining their culture. Tending for these bridges is an integral part of Khasi culture and helps foster togetherness. Many minority communities also exhibit resilience to the discrimination they experience based on cultural differences. For example, the COVID-19 pandemic led to an influx of anti-Asian violence and discrimination. A study conducted by Harvard graduate and licensed psychiatrist Justin A. Chen found that higher levels of ethnic identity, sense of belonging, and social support were associated with greater resilience among Asian Americans who were victims of racially motivated attacks. They were able to stay resilient by forming activist organizations like Stop AAPI Hate to speak out against racial injustice and provide education and support to victims. Another study conducted by Goldbach and Gibbs found that sexual minority adolescents, those who don't fit the sexual majority of heterosexuality, have a higher risk of self-harm, substance abuse, and developing anxiety or depression disorders. When they experience these issues, they turn to the LGBT community, using coping skills like finding positive role models in pop culture, talking to loved ones who have experienced the same things, and taking pride in their self-identity in order to stay resilient. So what we can see from these three different studies is that the most prominent way of fostering resilience within minority groups is by giving them a sense of belonging, by giving them a sense of togetherness. Whether this be through community efforts and maintained traditions like with the Khasi, through organized activism like with Asian Americans, or through social support and self-identity like with LGBT youth. So this brings me to my two-step solution for fostering togetherness within minorities. Step 1 is reducing disparity, and step 2 is providing social outreach and support. So addressing socioeconomic disparities will mitigate the need for minorities to constantly be so resilient, as well as bringing them equal. This starts with ensuring access to education and healthcare for all, which can be done using organizations like Doctors Without Borders, which provides medical aid to those in need across the world. Additionally, Plan International can be used to provide them with an education, and this specifically targets vulnerable groups who lack education and are marginalized. Additionally, addressing systemic racism and oppression of minorities by supporting federal and local legislation that will repeal and reform oppressive discriminatory laws and policies, as well as promoting economic empowerment by addressing income inequality and promoting job opportunities within minority communities. So some limitations to the solution are that in a lot of cases, systemic racism is composed of both cultural stereotypes against certain groups and legislations and policies that target specific minorities. And these issues can never be completely fixed. Additionally, many lawmakers and people in power will likely be resistant to change, especially if they put in place a law that targets certain minorities. They won't want to change it. Additionally, intersectionality. Many minorities will experience multiple different forms of discrimination, and that might be hard to mitigate. For example, if someone is both a person of color and a sexual minority. But some implications are that this solution will foster economic growth and prosperity for minorities and society as a whole, because it allows minorities to contribute to the workforce by starting businesses and getting jobs. It will also create a more inclusive society for different types of minorities and help them feel valued and included, which will promote a better self-identity. And finally, by providing universal health and education, this will obviously improve health and education for minorities. Solution 2 is addressing social outreach and support. So this starts with promoting positive role models. For example, Laverne Cox and Michelle Yeoh. Role models like these can promote positive self-identity in minorities and inspire them to achieve their goals in any field. Additionally, we can spur social connections within minority groups by putting together things such as social events, forums, or organized events to help bring them together. We can also create classes to educate the youth on social disparities they experience and how they can mitigate these issues that were caused by previous generations. And finally, celebrating diversity and cultural heritage through organizing cultural festivals, showcasing minority artists, and promoting cultural education can help create a renewed sense of self-identity within minorities. So, in terms of limitations, it may not be economically feasible to create new educational programs, and it would be hard to find teachers willing to talk about racial diversity or gender identity because these are very polarizing topics and they might not be qualified to talk about them, or they might not want to discuss things that will, upset the public. Also, there's no real way to help minority groups come together if they don't want to come together on their own in the first place. And finally, these efforts may not reach everyone we want them to because many people are isolated by language barriers or lack of access to any type of support, so they may never receive the benefits of this solution. In terms of implications, this solution will provide minorities with a renewed sense of togetherness as well as a new self-identity, which leads to enhanced well-being and resilience. By celebrating their culture, they'll be able to adhere to their own unique traditions that they may have lost otherwise. And additionally, a new generation of children will be able to learn about systemic discrimination of the past and be able to stop these issues from going further in the future. And finally, things like forums and providing minorities with more role models will propel them to have their own platforms and give them a voice that they may not have had in the past. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we're going to ask you 2 questions this morning. What information did you need before you began your research, and how did that information shape your research?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. What information did you need before you began your research, and how did that information shape your research?
So some information that I needed to look at before I began my actual research was probably baseline instances of systemic discrimination and looking at how there actually is a gap between minorities and the majority, and that shaped my research because I was able to draw specific conclusions based on instances of discrimination that I saw. Yeah.
Okay. And then lastly, what advice would you have for the other researchers who consider this topic?
I would definitely advise other researchers to look at this problem from a multifaceted view, not just focus on one minority, focus on a lot of different viewpoints, because there are a lot of different people in this country who experience discrimination and experience a lack of access to certain things in very different ways. So in order to provide a solution that will benefit everyone, it's important to do research from multiple different perspectives. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.